Hello, Charles in Enugu there. I understand that the rains have started becoming a little regular and that the cold city is really cool these days. So I'm sure that you are enjoying your signature morning, or have enjoyed the signature morning this far from our Enugu Center. And let's welcome you to Abuja this Thursday morning. My name is Owoh Njoko. And now, I think you remember that about 2 weeks back, we had an edition of this program in which we treated the investment by the Tinubu administration into Nigeria's agriculture sector. I think my guest that morning was Honorable Dennis Agbo, or the member of House of Representatives. And Dennis Agbo said something very, very strong and favorable to the Tinubu administration. He said that from his memories, he doesn't think he can remember any government that has invested the amount of money the Tinubu administration is investing in agriculture. And that ought to create a fundamental shift in Nigeria's economy. And Honorable Agbo reasoned it this way. Looking at the history of industrialization almost across the world, they have always been ticked off by agricultural overproduction. So much food produced that processing becomes a matter of cost. Packaging becomes a matter of cost. Necessary machinery for producing become a matter of cost. And of course, industrialization begins to grow from that point. In other words, what Tinubu is doing to agriculture is not just food sufficiency. It is beginning a process that we begin to produce our own raw material that can be used in several sectors. And when you talk about agriculture, you don't forget that cotton is part of it. And that ought to feed our textile mills and factories. A huge sector that takes so much labor and can create a lot of employment. Now, just yesterday, the federal government struck another deal to invest almost $100-something million yet into agriculture, indicating how mindful this government is about the strategic position of agriculture in the overall national development. Now, just before I entered the studio, my producer asked me a question. With all this investment that the government is making, and with the challenge of insecurity, how can the two be reconciled? The government is investing so much. In other words, we expect the farmers to go back to the farms. We expect some considerable mechanization of agriculture for large-scale farmers to come in. We expect all this investment in processing, and then insecurity is there. Now, just a week ago, there were 2 contradictory signals about the performance of our economy. The African Development Boss, Adesina, gave a bleak picture and warned. But Goldman and Sachs gave a very heartwarming picture. This contradiction is what we're going to look at this morning against the backdrop of our insecurity challenge. Presently, you get to meet my guest. For now, let's take a short break and we'll be back. Stay with us.
We are local.
We are right now with the wife of the man that was...
Why the main market is in chaos. People are...
We are national.
Those in support of this motion as amended, say aye.
Aye. We have taken the move by default.
We are international.
Israeli airstrikes.
Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment.
Signature TV, news in your pocket.
Every second, every minute, every day, news is breaking. Events occur and there are new developments. At Signature TV, we follow these stories objectively, bringing all sides without bias, explaining the complex issues, breaking down the numbers, and investigating the issues behind the news. Anywhere and everywhere, near or far, wherever the news is, we will be there. Signature TV. News in your pocket.
With a population of about 36 million people, the Southeast is awash with stories. Every day on Southeast News, we tell the peculiar story of the Southeast and her people.
Our Southeast should be the Silicon Valley of Nigeria.
Their successes, achievements, and daily challenges. Do you have a Southeast story to share? Community achievements and challenges, completed and uncompleted projects, bad roads, water scarcity, erosion, flooding, insecurity, or even disagreements? Bring it on to Southeast News. On Southeast News, no story is too big or too small. Southeast News. Let's tell our story. Showing on Signature TV every weekday at 4 p.m. WAT, 1600 hours GMT.
Well, we are still watching Signature Morning this Thursday morning from our Abuja Center. Just before I took that short break, I allowed us to converse on the much money the Tinubu administration has invested into agriculture and the projected consequence. I also told you that there were two contradictory projections just about early last week, on the outlook of Nigerian economy. Now, first, let's meet my guest. My guest this morning is a gentleman who knows how to manage the figures, the finances, the accounts, how the banks ought to do, how the economy ought to respond. Professor Godwin Owoh is a professor of banking, finance, top accountant. Prof, Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Where have you been?
Well, I'm around. We go in and out, but we're still around.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Thank you very much.
Now, if my producer is just going to be fair to me, can you give me that graph on the projection of Nigeria's economic health by Goldman and Sachs? And let us begin from there. Now, Prof, as my producer he's put it on the screen.
Okay.
Now, it's interesting to read that Goldman and Sachs says by 2075, Nigeria will be the world's 5th biggest economy. And Nigeria is projected to have a 13.1 trillion GDP. And what looks like the good news is that only 4 countries in the world will be above Nigeria. Interestingly, China, $57 trillion, India, $52.5 trillion, United States will be down to $51.5 trillion, Indonesia, $13.7 trillion, and big Nigeria, $13.1 trillion by 2075.
Good.
First, before I look at the variables considered, how do you take this news?
Well, I didn't take the news serious. It doesn't seem a serious news because the child that will run tomorrow will at least by today meet the basic growth trajectory from the date of birth. You see, the stage of the economy does not show that prospect is realizable.
But it's a 50-year projection.
Yes, 50 years, and believe you me, by then, all of us will have gone. And a 50-year-old child, assuming a child is born today, will be 50 years by that time, and it's no more a young man.
No, not at all.
So the projection is spurious. It's not supported by concrete evidence in that present, empirical or future. So the projection is false because I use the word false. Surprisingly, I don't want to say flawed, I say false. Because the Goldman & Sachs is a connected investment banker to Nigeria. So they are not neutral analysts. So their forecast cannot be relied upon because there's no independence. You know, Goldman & Sachs manages a good chunk of Nigerian foreign reserves. And by the 2022 annual accounts of the Central Bank of Nigeria, the central bank was exposed to Goldman & Sachs to the tune of $500 million, and to JP Morgan to the tune of $7 billion. Now, these are, I remember, Goldman & Sachs is actually regulated by the Reserve Bank in the US, so it's just a bank. It doesn't have that stature. It doesn't have that avalanche of experience and expertise to evaluate the Nigerian economy in the way it has done. Rather, it may be trying to project a good marketing posture, perhaps, to improve their holdings on the management of Nigerian Reserve. So I say that as a biased assessment, and it's not credible.
Yeah, let us query some of the variables they considered in arriving at this rather golden projection of Nigeria's economy. As we go along, I will go back to the 1960 projections and 1961 projections, and how well those ones have been realized. But Goldman & Sachs says that Nigeria's labor growth potentials are very strong. High youth population, a rising educated population, and that these are considerations in any economy that will grow.
Again, you can see by the time you start testing the indicators, the variables they used, the unreliability of that projection will become clearer. If you talk of the youth's population in Nigeria, that's also the projection that the number of youths under 35 will be up to 75% of the Nigerian population by that time. Now, there is also a projection, in fact, with empirical facts, that the youths are being consumed by drugs and terrorism and this get-rich-quick syndrome. Look at the JAMB result that just came out. 75% of those who took the exam could not score 200%, 200 points over 400, which is 50%. What type of use are we talking about? That is telling you that technology is actually consuming our youths. Nobody reads again. Everybody is on the internet from 24 hours. Give any problem, any assignment, they punch it in, and ChatGPT brings out the solutions. So the intellect, the quality of the intellect of today's youths is diminishing. And that is what is going to affect the strength of the youths of tomorrow.
And therefore this projection.
The projection is wrong. And remember, the active Nigerian youths with skills, with sound training, are outside Nigeria. They're in the US, they're in Canada. In fact, they are citizens in those countries. And the scenario here is not encouraging them to come back. So the quality of the youths that will remain here as Nigerians
to justify this projection,
it will be so poor and so unreliable that believe you me, the remaining of them are being consumed by terrorism, either by killing them or by recruiting them, because it is now more lucrative to be friends to the terrorists than to pursue a justified course of livelihood. Now, what are the politicians? How do they get the power? Of course, not by votes, because he had not considered returning the voting power, making politicians accountable, those who hold the monopoly of power, making them accountable to Nigerians. That is not the issue. Today, leaders, those in power, are not determined by the votes of the people. And what does that mean? Violence. Therefore, today, violent pays, that is the average youths, In fact, yesterday I engaged a youth who was accusing me that, oh, you people have finished everything. What are you people leaving for us coming up? I said, my friend, I've been a youth myself. It's a process, and I went through the entire rungs of the ladder. Primary school, secondary school, A-levels, before getting into the university, and all that. Professionally, all that. I went through the entire process. Today, how many youths in Nigeria are willing to do that? Those of our youths that are willing to do that are in diaspora. And they are going to remain in diaspora because it is diaspora that is preparing them for the real future. So the way we are going, the quality of the average youths in Nigeria will always be zero in terms of quality, because the actual qualitative Nigerian youths are outside Nigeria.
And therefore cannot really account for
no, they cannot.
Godwin and Sachs.
You see, there's a major error of assumption that all the youths in Nigeria will remain here. No. 80% of today's youths are diaspora focused. They are going out. They are going out where the environment is competitive, where they can work and get value for what they pay for, where they can compete for jobs and win if they have the skills and the experience, which is not the basis for the situation in this country. So how many youths are willing to stay? Yesterday, I had a shocker. The welder who built my dog kennel 4 years ago had migrated to Canada. The rain, because the rain was coming, I decided to seek him out to come and cover some area because of rain. The woman selling some, the guy is in Canada. I said, are you sure? He said he will give me his phone number. I will call him, and I did. He had relocated with his family. So all qualitative youths are leaving this country. How do you sustain this projection? So,
Prof, I just want you to consider something even on about this youth matter, and that is the content of the education locally the Nigerian youth is getting. Does it prepare him to perform this way Goldman and Sachs is projected? The content of the education.
I wish the content does, but the content is solid enough. Basically,
it's a matter of attitude.
It's a matter of attitude, and it's error of policy, like the Nigerian Education Research Council. It's a body that should immediately be disbanded because they are destroying education at the secondary school level by making too many subjects compulsory, too many relevant subjects compulsory at WAEC level. Let me take a quick example. For you to write WAEC, you must take civic education. Must. Then you must take what they call a trade subject, marketing. Then by the time you force a child to take civic education, marketing, with the English, maths, and physics, chemistry, how many other subjects will he have to choose? And he must not exceed 9. So you see a situation where our youth constricted and being forced out of core subjects like technical drawing. For any child that wants to do engineering anywhere, technical drawing is compulsory. Further mathematics is compulsory alongside the normal maths. That's why when you match our students with Ghanaian students, it becomes a problem. It becomes a problem because their depth of knowledge of mathematics
is weak.
It's very weak because they only do general mathematics, no further maths. But in Ghana, further maths is like everyday mathematics for everybody.
I don't want to make it casual. In secondary school in those days, we carry our further mathematics textbooks because they are big, and we worked with Professor Swagger because there was pride in doing mathematics.
Yes.
In fact, if we were not a double jazz PC student in my secondary, you know what double jazz PC means?
Of course.
Maths, physics, chemistry.
Exactly.
If we're not a double jazz PC student in my secondary school days, you felt very bad. Very bad. But today, I can't understand.
That's the problem. They are filled with languages, filled with irrelevant social sciences, instead of training the intellect in deep mathematical sciences, which when you even translate it into the arts, it becomes a super art. So today, I'm having a problem. There is one of the students under my small one-man scholarship, who today, I needed him to do physics, chemistry, biology, maths, further maths, technical drawing, economics, basic. I don't know why you want to force a child who is already doing economics that he must do marketing. He must do marketing when he's a pure science student, such that he will not be able to do technical drawing and geography. That is the real problem. So that NERC had forced students to convince WAEC that every school candidate must
do civic education,
marketing,
and the religion,
and
the religion.
Yes,
either Christian.
It's terrible. It's terrible. Before you now add the core relevant subjects. So when that is done, you see that a child need to register for at least 11
subjects
to get what, but you can't do more than 9. So it's a problem. And the Minister of Education must hear this, and that is what is affecting. Of course, you have seen the JAMB result. And for me, even though the JAMB result appeared the way it is, that exam should be cancelled, so that they should all retake this present, this UTME.
Okay, that is a tangent. I'm going to go to the second issue, the second variable that was considered by Goldman and Sachs in making this very rosy projection. But before I go to that, my producer says, take a break. Let's catch our breath, because Prof is loading so much to the viewer. I hope that the viewer has the time to digest all the information he's putting out this morning. We'll take a break and we'll come back shortly. Please stay with us.
Every second, every minute, every day, news is breaking. Events occur and there are new developments. At Signature TV, we follow these stories objectively, bringing all sides without bias, explaining the complex issues, breaking down the numbers, and investigating the issues behind the news. Anywhere and everywhere, near or far, wherever the news is, we will be there. Signature TV. News in your pocket.
Well, thank you very much for still being there, and we're this morning looking at what looks like a contradiction in projections. Now, the outlook of Nigeria's economy. Of course, my guest is still here, Professor Godwin Owoh. You can see I said, let's take a break so that you can digest the quantum of information Prof is giving us this morning. Prof, and I want us to look at the second factor that Goldman and Sachs considered in painting this very rosy picture of the Nigerian economy in the next 50 years. By 2075, it says the rate of investment in Nigeria. That the rate of investment in Nigeria progressively is increasing. And such cumulatively, by 2075, it sees a very big economy. But I want to, as I'm not an expert, so I do not know how they did all their calculations. But I know for a fact that our electricity sector seems not to be helping matters. And the number of people complain about contradictory policies, somersaults, something that you cannot really project. You cannot say for sure is what it's going to be tomorrow. Considering what I've just said, and from others I'm sure you know, do you think the investment rate in Nigeria, both local and foreign investment coming to Nigeria, can sustain this project?
Yeah, the projection to that extent, like the other one, is not sustainable. The facts, the evidences, the scenarios, the environment does not show, that has no potential for that level of growth. You see, because if you talk of, he had not considered the facts that no country will just stagnate while Nigeria is growing. No country will just be waiting for you while you are growing. No, every country is making efforts. The technocrats are allowed to work. the political environment is, most other countries are recruiting the best. You saw what happened in South Korea. Just because a president dared proclaim something that looks like emergency, he's off and he's facing a criminal trial. These are countries that are serious. Look at the way China is responding to the US tariff. Look at the way Canada is responding, the European Union, even the US itself. Even though they've set up the tariff structure, they are responding to the feelers they are getting within the entire global economy. So no country is waiting. Ghana here is also having a lot of progress. Kenya, a lot of progress, where we are making known. You see, our method of calculating and tying cash flows to loans is negative. That is, we borrow and borrow and borrow without caring of the cash flow projection that will support the borrowing. So how can you talk of investments when there is no reliable cash flow reliance, where controls, transparency is almost zero, in fact negative? So what is the quality of the investment that is coming? Is the investment coming from Ponzi schemes, as we've been noticing? That's the problem, because I'm not seeing where the investment is coming. If investment is coming, one good sign, Godwin and Sachs failed to even incorporate the forex, foreign exchange market dynamics to the projection, because that will have shown you whether the current foreign exchange regime we are witnessing is realistic or mechanically manipulated. And I tell you clearly, with enough evidence and facts, that is mechanically engineered and manipulated. And if that is the case, at what point do you finish paying the loans you have accumulated? At what point do you end up containing the fiscal balance, given the enormous amount you have to use in debt servicing going forward? That's the problem. Why is the government at all levels engaged in heavy borrowing? Why is every skill in Nigeria directed towards political position, not in production, not in competitive output of goods and service? Before, by now, the only thing in the lips and mind and legs of everybody now is how to come to APC and become a member of it. What is in APC? Is this a production field? It's just a direct access to natural resources without any effort. So how can you be talking of investment? Investment in which area? Where are we leading in Africa? Where are we leading even in West Africa? In fact, locally here, where are we leading? And unfortunately, Goldman and Sachs does not know that Nigeria is not just Wuse, Gariki, Asokoro, and Maitama. Where are the GDPs of the states that cumulates to the national GDP? No figure. So is that GDP for Nigeria just dropping from the sky? We need to know the various state by state contribution to the aggregate GDP before we now talk of GDP. I'm telling you now that Nigeria has no GDP, statistically, economically, and legally, because it has to be a cumulative effect figure of what comes from all the states. So can I comfortably pick a figure now, a database, and say this is GDP of Enugu State, this is GDP of Jigawa, Zamfara. These are the big drivers, these are the lags, that is the states that are drying up behind. What is the problem there? Let us solve it. That's a problem. Then I will just come up and GDP of Nigeria. No, the issue of computing GDP in this country has to be done properly. We have to get the states, each of the states, GDP of the states, then GDP of the components that make within the geographical area of FCT, we aggregate and say this is GDP of Nigeria. So, but if you show me GDP of Nigeria, which component of GDP can I ascribe to River State, for instance? There is none. At a point, Lagos attempted. The World Bank had funded a lot of efforts in this area. No results. No result whatsoever. A lot of resources have gone in, no result. We need to have GDP of every state, then reconcile it to that of the federal, and we have a national GDP. So if Godwin and Sachs is sitting somewhere telling me about GDP of Nigeria growing to where? From where? Yes, there could be components and all the material variables that should enable us to compute GDP, but it is not yet done. There's no GDP for Nigeria.
Yeah, okay, Prof, you've queried that. That is outside of my area of competence. You know how to handle the figures. You know what ought to be done in the states before we can aggregate to say this is Nigeria's national GDP. But there's something interesting that Goldman says. And they say that Nigeria's productivity convergence has such a bright outlook. And when I went through it, I asked myself, productivity, when even our own government says the textile industry is collapsed. I'm talking government statement, not my statement. Agriculture is under stress because of insecurity. The oil sector is under stress because of vandalism and illegal bunkering. I'm looking at the real sectors that ought to be giving us the productivity outlook. That when they all are pulled together, we can say this is their contribution to the GDP. Yet our own government is talking about negative. So how did the admission of our own government and most of his statements, by the way, let me draw attention to what the president said in changing Milikiari. He said that he wanted to improve investment in the sector, which, if you allow me do some analysis, just logical statement, it means the investment is now bad. By removing you and bringing somebody else, I will improve it. Logical. If the president says it's not good and Goldman says it's good, where is contradiction coming from?
No, the president is correct. And you see, Goldman and Sachs, as I said earlier, had not thoroughly established neutrality in diagnosing the analytical coefficients. And that is the kind of result you will see. So the president is correct. It's on the table. He feels it. He knows it. It's in Nigeria. And even before becoming president, he knows how the oil sector works. So the investment outlook is not good. If you look at the debt overhang, the cost of debt to GDP ratio, the GDP will have accepted for purposes of computations. If you look at the quality of productivity in the country, production, the export capacity of Nigeria, these are what makes investment viable. Nobody takes money where he will make a loss.
No.
The economy must show prospects of good returns, sustainable returns, realistic returns before an investor will bring in his money. Because most of the people you call investors are actually people that borrowed funds from other sources
and want to make
profit and return the capital. So nobody will put it in a way it will fail. So when we use the word invest as if a particular money is just sitting somewhere that will just jump freely, no free lunch anywhere. So that is the problem. So the investment outlook here is not right. Because even me, between Abuja and Kano, between Abuja and Kaduna, I cannot undertake any investment that will put me on the highway. Now, do you have market on air? There's no market on air. That's the problem. That's a simple way of seeing the situation we're into. I cannot comfortably move from here to Calabar to Enugu by road in course of business transactional activity. I have to go on air. Is there a market on air? Who will I trade with on air? So that tells you the problem we are facing. That is the reality. Perhaps Government and Sachs and his the people that do their analysis, perhaps they don't stay here. They've never been here. That's the problem. So the investment outlook is not good. It has to be worked on. There's nowhere you refuse to work on anything and it turns good on its own. We are not working on this economy.
Prof, I'm going to raise the matter of how we're going to work on it, but first, let us look at a contradictory projection. In fact, not just a projection, a statement on what is now. If my producer is ready, just give me that visual. This is, as we were conversing, the public power went off. And suppose I was a manufacturer processing some products meant for export under a certain temperature. And as that went on, public power went off. How will I say the conditions that attract investment, the conditions that grow investment, the conditions that make investment profitable and therefore causes investors to gravitate? Let me not use the hard word that they are not there. They are doubtful here in this environment. They are very doubtful in this environment. Maybe if you are seeing us again, that's just because we have reverted to our own power supply. And how many companies in Nigeria can keep running millions of naira every day and survive? That's the environment that the Prof is talking about. Prof, this is a real experience, isn't it?
Direct experience. It explains everything. And that is the reality. That is the reality. And perhaps before halfway into the remaining time, this light will definitely go off again. So that's the problem.
And that's investor. That's the environment in which investor.
No.
Godwin says investments will increase.
Even the president has made it clear that we will anticipate further increase in the cost of power, which will anticipate. So consider where we are now. We are being prepared for further increase in power. Then consider the attack. Even those who operate under the cloak of government unleash on businesses. As I was coming, part of what caused my delay in coming was I had to intervene in AMAC. Some people in uniform harassing people carrying crumbling materials and all that. It's terrible.
And that's the condition in which somebody has to invest.
Will have to invest. So even the government itself is unleashing terror, tax terror on SMEs, on one-man businesses, on businesses of households that should make them sustain their own livelihood. They are under terror every day. They are under attack in the name of all kinds of taxation. Now, how can investors come in a situation where all ministries, departments of governments are exploring all powers they have to tax the common people? Who are you actually taxing, really? That's a problem. Then the major challenge is the current drive where every government official wants to run government as no man's business for purpose of establishing his own personal business. So for every office you see, there is an equivalent private office run by that officer. The same person. That is the environment under which somebody will be projecting that investment will grow. And of course, the youths, the active youths, the skilled youths can't operate here, and they are not operating here. They are not operating here. They are going out. Maybe one day they will come in with resources to change the system. Because if you say politics is local, you also have to know that the resources are external. Politics are local, but the resources for those politics are external. So maybe that is our only hope. Because we've called on God, we prayed, we have the highest number of churches and all that. That is not the solution, because God gave us everything.
Even the intellect.
Even the intellect. We have it. So I don't know what next Nigerians want. What next the government wants if they refuse to do just one thing: discipline that will fight corruption. Remember, if you look at the Chinese, why are they able to withstand the U.S. tariffs?
Discipline.
They changed. Socialist Party took a decision, even at the cost of blood up to a point, and insisted on discipline. So if in anything you are doing, you ask yourself, where is the discipline in this thing I'm doing? That's the question. If there is no discipline, there should be repercussion.
Well, Prof, my producer is telling me that the next program is coming. I know they didn't start one in time. There's a second leg to this conversation, Prof.
Yes.
And we must come back because we need to conclude it. Because we need to look at additional contradictory projection that contradicts what Goldman Sachs has done, so that we can balance and then begin to say, look, what ought we to do to see whether we can even go. You know, they say when you aim for the sky, you may hit the roof.
Clear.
Now Goldman Sachs may say we can get to the space. Let's see whether we can get to the sky. Prof,
by God's grace.
You might thank you immensely for finding time to come this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I did too.
Yeah. And that's our program for this Thursday morning. This program never ends. As I've promised you openly here now, I'll bring Prof back because there's another dimension to this conversation. Additional, the boss of the African Development Bank, has another dimension to it, where he says Nigeria GDP is even dropping down below independence time. We'll also look at the factors he has raised, and then Prof will look at what we ought to do to get out of this mess we have found ourselves in. But today, that's the edition of the program. It never stops. Tomorrow, we'll be looking at the coalition fever. What is the Atiku camp saying? We'll challenge them with their own words. That will be tomorrow. For this morning, have a great day and enjoy the rest of the day. Good morning.